That was amazing. There's a screen back there so I can see what you all are seeing. And moving, inspiring. Jeff, thank you so much for reminding us to keep dreaming, to do it, don't quit. Debra Washburn did her undergraduate work in education at BYU and graduate work in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University in Los Angeles. She works in both clinical and business settings and is an accomplished writer and speaker. As a former teacher, mother of 4, and grandmother of 10, she understands how learning to work helps children become self-sufficient problem solvers. As a therapist, she outlines steps parents can take to raise strong, resilient children. And now, please welcome Debra Washburn.
Well, I don't know about you, but being a parent was a lot harder than I expected it to be. Now, it was a lot more joyful, but way more difficult. So one of the things that we do as parents that is hard but joyful is teach them to work. Now, when we talk about why we want to teach children to work, we say things like, well, they've got to learn sometime. They're going to need skills when they're adults. You know, if kids would help around the house would be a lot cleaner. So we use those as our reasons for teaching children to work, but it turns out those aren't the real reasons. The real reason we want to teach children to work is to build their self-esteem. Brené Brown, in her work on vulnerability, talks about how kids are hardwired for struggle. And what she means by that is you start out doing a task. Maybe it's making your bed or unloading the dishwasher, and you're not good at it. So you have to do it again, and you're still not good at it. And you have to keep doing it and struggling until you finally master that skill. And we're hardwired to do that. So what that means is we put in an effort, and as we put in that effort, we develop skills and abilities. And with those skills and abilities, we have accomplishments. And as we develop skills and abilities and turn them into accomplishments, we end up with self-esteem. Now, you heard the First Lady talk about this. The highest level of self-esteem turns out to be problem solving. So when you have skills and abilities and accomplishments and you start to really like yourself, then you start to trust yourself to think through how to solve a problem. So we get a lot of benefit by learning how to work at an early age. Now today we're talking specifically about doing chores around the house, and I want to talk about why we do that a little bit more and how important that is. But this is a statistic I learned recently that really frightened me, and I think it will frighten you as well. When you think that the #1 cause of death of children 10 to 17 in our state is suicide, doesn't that just horrify you? Now, it used to be accidents. Kids would make bad choices and they would get hurt. Now they're choosing to hurt themselves. And we need to figure out how to build resilient children so they don't have a desire to hurt themselves. Now, I understand that learning to work isn't going to fix all of the problems that are associated with this issue, but it's a big one. It's a big step forward. I really appreciate the power of this phrase. We're born to survive, but not to thrive. And I want you to think about that for just a second. When we're born, at the base of our skull right here, we have a reptilian brain. And it grows and matures, and it grows and matures until it gets to be about 2 years old. And then it never gets any more mature than that. So you've got a 2-year-old control mechanism going on all the time. Now think about how a 2-year-old acts. They have tantrums. They only do what they want to do. They get upset easily. So we've got this reptilian brain. Now that's not all bad, because we do need that reptilian brain for survival. It says, quick run, there's steps behind you and it's a dark alley. They say things like, you've got to get some sleep. You're too tired. So we need that reptilian brain, but it's never going to grow up. But what does grow up is our executive function, this prefrontal cortex right here. It grows and matures, and it grows and matures till it gets to be, till you're about 25 years old before it's fully developed. Now, the reptilian brain makes all of your final decisions your whole life. But don't panic. Your executive function has a lot of influence over your reptilian brain because your executive function learns about cause and effect. So it can reason with your reptilian brain and calm it down and help you make good decisions. Now, that's going to be really important because you're going to see a lot of reptilian behavior from your children. And unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of reptilian behavior in yourselves. So we're born to survive, but not to thrive. In order to thrive, we need knowledge and skills that lead to accomplishments. And we need those accomplishments then to lead us to good problem solving. Now, my experience is if you showed up here tonight, then you're already in the problem solving group because you said, I'm going to go there just in case they can give me any additional information that will help me be a good parent. So you're going to use those problem solving skills to help your children develop them as well. Some other information on resilience that might be helpful to you is Angela Ducksworth has written some great materials on grit. She says gritty children are resilient. They keep going even when times are tough. Now, Carol Dweck writes about the growth mindset. The growth mindset says, when I fail at something, I'm not a failure. I just failed at that one thing. So I'm going to try again. And then I'm going to try again, and I'm going to keep trying until I get it right, and that's where we get grit. So if we want resilient children with great self-esteem, we're going to help them learn to work as one of our key tools to help them do that. So we say, well, you know, why don't we teach our kids to work? Turns out one of the main reasons is we don't need them to work like we once did. If you were a 19th century farm family, you probably had your 8-year-old daughter wearing a full-length skirt, cooking dinner over an open fire for the entire family while babysitting 2 younger children. And the reason you did that is that mom and the other kids had to be out harvesting the crops. So you needed that 8-year-old to cook dinner for the whole family. But in this time, we don't need our children to do that. In fact, a lot of times we say, oh, you know, it's really more work to teach them than it is to do it myself. It takes more time, it exhausts me, it causes my reptilian brain to rear up. So it's really more work to teach them how. The problem is, when we think that way and add to it this idea about they're too young, they can't do it, then the more we think they can't do, the more they really can't do it. So the less we expect of them, the less we think they can do, and the less they think they can do. So we need to start pretty early, getting them working, teaching them some chores, because I promise you, we don't want them to cook wearing long dresses over open fires. We're not going to go there. But we do want to teach them how to take on tasks that are kind of challenging and go after them. My husband Mike and I were at the Maker Faire at Thanksgiving Point a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting between these 2 children, an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we were soldering circuits to make lights glow. And these kids were faster and better at it than I was. And I thought, wow, I would have thought, what if they get burned by that soldering iron? But no, the education team just told them what to do, and they did it. So kids can do a lot more than we think they can. So yes, they learn things through their sports teams and their art and their music. Those are also great ways for them to learn to do work. But when they do chores at home, we have the most control over what's going on. We can teach them, we can coach them, we can praise them. So chores are such a golden way to cultivate children. So let's talk about how we get that done. First of all, we explain why it's important. These kids are smart, and they want to know why. So a few months ago, I was in a supermarket parking lot with one of my grandsons, and as we got to the car with our cart, he said to me, "Oh, just a minute, I have to go help that lady." And he took off, and there was an elderly lady, and he went over and asked if he could return her shopping cart to the rack. And she was very gracious and grateful. And when he came back, I said, "How did you know to do that?" And he said, "Well, my mom explained to me that as people get older, they need help, and that it's a good thing to help other people, and it makes the world a better place." So she had explained this to him, he understood, and he did it. So explain to your kids why you want them to do particular chores. Then show them what to do, and then do it with them. We moved from Salt Lake to Highland a few months ago, and I was dazzled by a couple of our grandkids as they packed food storage from the truck to storage, from the truck to storage. They worked and worked and worked. And I was so impressed that they could do this. And then I thought, oh, but look, there are their fathers also packing things in and showing them how to do it and correcting them when they were doing it wrong and praising them when they did it right. So it was no wonder they were willing to stay with the job for so long. Okay, we've got to inspect what we expect. Now, let's go back to that reptilian brain for just a minute. That reptilian brain likes the path of least resistance. If I can get out of it, I want to. If I could stuff all my toys in the closet and get the door closed, maybe no one will notice. If I can shove them all under the bed, is anybody going to check? That's going to be the path of least resistance, and that's what I want to take. But if I know Mom and Dad are going to come and check on it, I know I'm not going to do it that way, because we spend our whole lives checking to see how systems work. I think about this example. If you take a 14-year-old boy to a video game store and buy him a video game, and then you find out you need an adapter for another piece of equipment, 2 weeks later, you take that boy back to the store, it's very likely he's going to say to you, "Can I get a video game?" Now, your reptilian brain's going to answer him by saying things like, "I can't believe you would ask for another game. You're so ungrateful. I just bought you a game." Because your reptilian brain is feeling that sting of his ingratitude. But what if he's not really being ungrateful? What if he's just checking to see what the system will bear? His reptilian brain's saying, "Go ahead, ask. What have you got to lose?" The worst they can do is say no. So we're always checking to see what the system will bear. So before we assume that he's just ungrateful, we should find out if he's really just asking. So we say things like, "Well, babe, I just bought you one 2 weeks ago, so it'll probably be your birthday before you could get another one. Or you could save up for one." And he's likely to say to you, "Cool." He just wanted to know how the system would work. Well, when our kids do work, they want to know how the system works. Are we going to check or not? Are we serious about this or not? All right, we have to praise our kids. If you don't know John Gottman's work on emotional bank accounts, you really need to know that, and Gary Chapman's love languages. Those are two things every person in the world should work hard at, because we have to have 5 positives to equal a negative. So when we notice them doing something great, let's just tell them. Let's be sure to tell them we noticed the effort, that we saw them succeed, because we have these self-reinforcing paths in the brain, and the more they hear good news, the more they want to hear good news. So they're going to be anxious to do more good things to get more of that positive feedback. Now, this is a really big one, and that is you've got to know your own children. I have seen examples where children say, at 5 years old, I can pick up all my own toys. For other kids, you say to a 5-year-old, "Go clean your room, go pick up your toys." And what they think you said was, "Go down to your room now and play with your toys for a while." So that's what they do. And they need mom or dad down there helping them pick up the toys. Some kids, even when they're old enough to pick up the toys, still have trouble with that. So maybe your child's one of those children that needs I'll help you clean your room and then you help me unload the dishwasher, because they work better as a team. So figuring out what your child responds to is a critical part of this. This is the hard one. This is by far the hardest one, is this prepare to use consequences. We love as parents, this is our reptilian brain again, we love to preach, lecture, and moralize. Following through with consequences is way harder. But if we want our children to take us seriously, we're going to have consequences. So we talk about this model. I like this one in particular. What the problem is, why it's a problem, without a punishing tone of voice. Let me show you what I mean. If you don't take the garbage out, the kitchen will really smell bad. If you don't take the garbage out, the kitchen will really smell bad, idiot. Now see, you don't actually say the word idiot, but you didn't need to because your tone of voice did. So if we can correct them without that tone of voice, they can hear the message that we mean them to hear instead of that nonverbal message that comes through louder. So we tell them what the problem is, we tell them why it's a problem, and we do it without being punishing. Now, I understand sometimes your reptilian brain's going to get the best of you and it's not going to come out like you'd like it to. So we're just going for percentages. We're just doing this as often as we can. But if it doesn't work, then we move to consequences. Now, consequences, if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember consequences. If you don't implement consequences, nothing else will matter. So our daughter was working with her 9-year-old, and she's kind of a tough case on some of this. And so our daughter said to her one day, you know what? You don't have to do anything anymore except go to school. You don't have to do your chores, you don't have to do your homework, don't have to practice the piano, don't have to do anything. But you do need to understand that responsibilities are paired with privileges. So if you decide not to do any of the responsibilities, you also do have to give up the privileges. So the next day, she came upstairs and she said, her mother said to her, I need your dirty clothes in the laundry room. And she said, ooh, that's a chore, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And our daughter, Angela, said, okay, no problem, you don't have to do that. But remember that if you don't bring me the clothes, I won't launder them. And that means that after a while, you'll have to get dirty clothes out of the laundry. And you might not smell that great at school. And the next thing you know, those clothes were up in the laundry room. And the next day, she came upstairs wearing a sparkly pink belt. And her mother said, oh, wow, I'm sorry. You don't really need those to hold up your pants, that belt to hold up your pants. That's a privilege, so I'm going to need to have that back. I didn't mean to leave that in your room. And she said, no, I'm going to come right home and do my responsibilities. And she said, you give me back the belt now, and when you come home and do those responsibilities, then I'll give you the belt back. We have to mean it. Now, that conversation's probably going to go on for a lot of years, but Lauren is really showing signs of recognizing that responsibilities and privileges go together. So you have to figure out your child, and you have to say, does my child respond if I take things away? You can't have an iPad today. You can't watch television. You can't play with friends. Does my child respond better if I give them additional chores to do? I've got to figure out something that is really uncomfortable. It has to hurt or it's not going to stick. Now, sometimes parents will say to me, I've tried everything. My child doesn't respond to anything. And I'll tell you why that happens. First of all, they haven't found what's sticky for that child. And second of all, they're not reinforcing it. They're not sticking to it until it works. I had a client years ago, and she's 17 years old, and her mother said, well, you can tell me all of this, but I'm just telling you, she doesn't care about anything. She isn't going to do anything. And I said, let's keep looking, let's keep looking. What we figured out was that when her boyfriend knocked at the door, if he couldn't come into the house until her chores were done, all of a sudden she was incredibly skillful at getting her chores done. So I promise you, every child has things they care about, but they have to know you mean it and that you'll stick with it. If you want to see them develop that work ethic, we have to mean it and we have to stick with it. Just one more thing about the praise. Again, you have to do the praise without punishing too. Now that seems obvious, right? But think about this. You can say to someone, well, I see you finally got your bed made. I didn't think you were ever going to master that. Now we've taken the praise away and we've replaced it with a punishment. So when you compliment people, watch that tone of voice and don't add any punishment at the end. So it turns out that resilient children learn to problem solve, they learn to take responsibility, but they're hardwired for struggle. So they really have to work at it over time, and that means we have to work at it over time with them. But I love this good news. The child learns to take pride in doing a good job. They develop that strong self-regard and that healthy self-love. And it turns out that as we cultivate these children, the number one punishment is their parents' disapproval. They do not want to disappoint us. So we try to be balanced and moderate, cultivate them a step at a time, and get to the point where they are really pleased to receive our positive self-regard. Again, I've got a room here full of problem solvers. I hope I've delivered something to you that you can use to add to your toolbox. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debra, so much. So let's build.